Yo, and welcome into week 4 of Pregaming the SEC. Jacob Hester, Chris Doring back again for another week of SEC action on their gridiron. And man, this one feels good. You know why it feels good? Well, because we're talking college football, but also you're hearing us right now on SEC Radio, channel 374 over on Sirius XM, along with our YouTube channel on Apple, on Spotify. A lot of different ways to pregame there, Christopher Paul Doring.
Hey, you know why else it sounds good? Because we are not having to commiserate like we did after week 1. Our alma maters were amongst the best looking teams in the SEC in week 3. So we get a chance to puff the chest out. I, for one, have not been able to puff my chest out. As a Florida Gator, it's been few and far between for a long time now. So I'm gonna take this chance to celebrate Florida's victory, and even more so, celebrate what I felt like I was right on point about when it came to looking at that game.
Oh, coming out with an attaboy for himself out of the gate.
I'm hurting my shoulder right now with all the pats on the back I'm giving myself. I was right on with how I looked at the LSU-Mississippi State game, some of the deficiencies on the offensive line for Mississippi State that I thought LSU's front seven would be able to take advantage of, which they did. Some of the inconsistencies with Tennessee's offense that continued to hold them back, and feeling good about, at least for 1 week, what I'm starting to figure out about the SEC.
It does feel better. The SEC has a better feel to it. There's some teams, and you mentioned a couple, that feel like they're heading in the right direction. And let's don't wait any longer. Here every single week on Pregaming the SEC, we have a Hold My Beer. Now, the Hold the Beer, as we say every week, it can be good, it can be bad, it can be a little indifferent, and we explain ourselves every single week. Well, this is a good Hold My Beer for my entry into this segment this week, and that is Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors, the LSU tandem. Oh my gosh, how efficient was that in Starkville? And Jaden Daniels, 30 of 34, 2 touchdowns, 361 yards through the air, 15 carries for 64 yards, added 2 more scores on the ground. And Malik Neighbors, 13 catches, 239 yards, 2 scores himself. And if he plays that entire game, who knows what that number gets up to. So you think you had a good offensive performance? Well, Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, they said, hold my beer. We're going to go on the road, 11 a.m. kickoff. We don't want to hear about a sleepy performance by us going out there this week. That was impressive. Can they parlay that now? Because they were not on the same page in week number 1. We talked about it here on the podcast. If those two guys get on the same page, they don't even have to have it to the extent they had it in Starkville. But if they do get on the same page, look out Arkansas, look out Ole Miss, Mizzou, some of these teams coming up on LSU's schedule.
Yeah, I thought Jaden Daniels was fantastic from the outset. I mean, taking what the defense was giving him early on, there were a number of different times where he was able to move the chains with some short throws, bought some time with his legs. Then they started to hit some shots down the field on some double moves. I thought one of his best throws was standing in there on a blitz on 3rd down, a guy coming free right down through the A gap, and just buys a little bit of time, fires one over the middle to move the chains beyond the line to gain. But yeah, he was fantastic in second half, just using his legs the way that he did to evade the rush and turn a sack into a big gain. How he's able to navigate some of the zone read stuff they use was great. But Big Terp, I like accountability, and certainly we're going to have some accountability later in the show when we get to our Take It to the Bank reviews. But on SEC this morning, the simulcast that we do on the SEC Network on Friday, we did future headlines, and I was bummed out on Monday. We didn't go back to the future headlines, Hess. But one of the things I said in future headlines, I tried to come up with something like real catchy for the headlines that we put together for LSU and Mr. Rogers and the whole Will Rogers thing. Like I said, Starkville is Malik's neighborhood. And I kind of predicted he was going to have a big game, but I don't even think in my wildest dreams I could have thought of a guy having 10 for like 188 in the first half alone, man. It was impressive.
Yeah, they tried time and time again to single cover Malik Neighbors. He made them pay. And remember, Florida State was daring LSU to do that. Quarterback, receiver, not on the same page. They've learned from that. Now you got to put it together for 2 weeks. 2 weeks has to turn into 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and so on and so forth. And so we'll see if they can get that done. But Mr. Doring, where are you passing that beer to?
Well, you were the positive guy. I'm going to go the opposite
Uh-oh.
end of the spectrum. And last week in the Pregaming the SEC episode, was that episode 3 last week? I think,
Yeah,
or
that's how it
yeah,
works. 1, 2,
yeah,
3, and 4.
episode
Yep.
3. Yep, yep. So
Check.
episode 3, I was my ire was aimed squarely at the secondary of Texas A&M. It was embarrassing the way that they went about not only covering guys in the pass game, but tackling them after the reception was made. Was very upset with what they put on film. In terms of embarrassment, I'm gonna look at Alabama's offensive line. You thought the secondary's performance was embarrassing? Hold my beer, because we're gonna go out here and show you some embarrassing performances. And I think what made it more embarrassing for me, Hess, was that yeah, they were bad against Texas, but maybe we could at least justify it because they were playing Texas. A lot of the top tier players in the country, what they've been able to do to build that defensive line. But you go to Tampa and against South Florida, a team that what they win last year, 1 or 2 games last year.
I believe it was one game. Yeah, I think it was a singular game.
Yeah, that they were able to not only have 5 sacks, second game in a row that Alabama's offensive line has given up 5 sacks, but even on plays where the quarterbacks were getting the ball off, they were getting hit in the face, hit in the chest. And so I just, I don't know if they can find a solution to the woes that have been kind of haunting them the last couple of weeks, but that was an embarrassment what Alabama's offensive line put on tape. So hold my beer to those guys. If you thought Texas A&M secondary was bad, we'll one-up you with what we did on Saturday against USF.
Yeah, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at it as you were talking, CD. Now, this is a little bit better than it was against Texas, but to your point, South Florida, not the opponent that Texas was. Of the 5 starting offensive linemen, only 1 had a passing grade in overall production in this matchup. And
let me ask you this.
The passing grade, by the way, was 66.6, so barely.
Well, give me what the left side, give me left tackle and left guard, what their individual grades for, because I can tell you the left guards probably were the lowest of anybody's on that line.
Left tackle, you had 50.8% was the grade. Left guard, you had 62%.
Okay, all right. So yeah, regardless, though, it was bad, and certainly not what we came to expect. Not what we were being sold in the preseason. Remember how vocal members of that offensive line were about how much better that group was going to be this year, and how they were out to with a chip on their shoulder to change the narrative about the O-line. They've taken a step backwards, if anything, in 2023.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think so. And players that we thought would be all conference, maybe even all American type players.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the center position, that was somebody that we thought highly of, and that's 2 weeks in a row he's graded below 60% in Seth McLaughlin. That's just not where we had him. I mean, JC Latham, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at it, 66%. Like, that's a player I think a lot of. I think he's a Sunday player. They're just not getting it done right now. He was the one he was actually the one passing grade as I sit here and I look at him.
Yeah, I mean that's
but still
like
barely passing. No, it's not. So that's a group that I expected more out of, and I think down the road they could continue to try to get better. But I thought they'd be, from the very onset, they would be a group that Alabama could count on. And the blame's always going to go to the quarterback position. But when Ty Simpson came in there, I give him credit for playing as well as he did, because he was taking free shots. Yeah. Like, guys not even getting a hand on the defender and taking a shot in the back.
And did you see one of the rushes? I believe it was Simpson. The left tackle actually threw the rusher into his legs from the backside. So I mean, they're not helping out their quarterbacks, and if anything, doing damage. And I think that's again part of the reason why you see Jalen Milroe being named as the starter heading into the Ole Miss game.
All right, that's going to be the beers that we pass out here for this week. But as we always do, before we pregame, we review here on Pregaming the SEC, but I also want to remind you about our friends over at Blue Delta Jeans. Go to the website, bluedeltajeans.com. Your pants, your pattern, they're going to come in and they're going to make sure they fit. Even somebody built like me that CD will point out at time to time here on this podcast. It's okay. Yes, they will find a pair of jeans to fit you. In fact, I've got 2 pair of Blue Delta jeans.
Don't they just sew them up for you, like perfectly, like
exactly?
Yeah,
they'll find the person to come measure you, laugh at your measurements, and then they get them out and they make sure that they are comfortable. All right, let's see if we remember the tagline. Nothing feels as good as custom fits. Boom.
Nice. I
There you
love it.
go.
Hey, your boy Peter Burns actually showed off some of the golf pants that the U.S. golf team will be wearing, courtesy of
Of
our
course
friends
he
over at Blue
did.
Delta.
Of
Yeah.
course, Peter Burns is the one. It's all about Blue Delta's the star. Peter Burns is just trying to hold on to the star. There you go.
Hey,
BlueDeltaJeans.com is the website.
our guy Peter Burns is going to make a trip, evidently, to check out the folks in their home stadium there, the backyard of Blue Delta in Oxford, Mississippi, for your LSU Tigers traveling to Ole Miss there in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I might have to find my way to that game as well, trying to effort that as we speak. All right, as we do, we go from hold my beer to last call. And a lot of times last call will go a little bit all over the place, but here I want to know what the major last call, the one that you want to go back CD and you got to say, hey, you know what? Of all the situations we have play out in the SEC this week, I'm going to talk about this one. And since I know what yours is going to be, stop it. Let me go ahead and get mine out of the way. And that is the biggest win of any SEC team so far. The Missouri Tigers 30, Kansas State, the 15th ranked Kansas State, the defending Big 12 champion Kansas State 27. This was the game last year that Mizzou lost 42-10. You and I caught up with Drink at the Senior Bowl, at spring meetings, at media days. Every time we sat down and had a conversation with him, he found a way to bring this game up. This game meant something to him. They were embarrassed last year how it turned out. Kansas State ran all over them. Missouri couldn't run the football, and this one meant something. And my gosh, Brady Cook, have your day. You get booed to start the game, and then by the end of the game, you throw for 356 and 2 touchdowns. Blake Baker and that defense found a way to stop Kansas State just enough to get a victory there. This one is massive, and I do mean massive for Eli Drinkwitz, our guy, and this program, beating a team that embarrassed you a year ago. What a home victory for the Mizzou Tigers.
Yeah, great win for the Tigers. And you mentioned the chip on the shoulder that they've had for 365 days to kind of wipe away the embarrassment at the hands of the Wildcats last year in Manhattan. So they were highly motivated. I thought the thing that I liked the most was their resiliency. Right off the bat, a fluky touchdown that Kansas State's able to catch off a deflection. Doesn't get the folks from Missouri down. They go back down the field and score. At multiple times they had leads that they gave up, found themselves trailing, and put together a touchdown drive that took 2 plays, I think, one to Schrader and the other to Burden to get back in the end zone to knot things up. And then the long kick after a 5-yard delay of game penalty. Our guy Drink got bailed out by Harrison Mevis, knocking down a 60-plus yarder to win it as time expired. But I want to go back to something you said, about Brady Cook and him getting booed in the pregame and the comments that Drink made afterwards. Remember when we were young, it was like, don't boo the college kids. They're not professionals. They don't get paid for it.
Yeah.
You can boo the NFL guys. Now that there's NIL stuff, is it more acceptable to boo college players? Are you allowed to do that now?
I think you can do whatever you want. I mean, you're paying to get into the game. Tickets aren't cheap anymore. Now, I'm not a fan of booing your own players, but yeah, we see it all the time.
Are you a fan of calling for firings of your coach like that? That's what I think. Fans now mistake their entitlement. Like your job as a fan is to support your team, not call for firings and undermine the culture there and create controversy like I think so many fans want to, including by booing your starting quarterback.
Maybe the booing was something that led to him having such a massive day. I don't know. You and I both like to play with chips on our shoulders. I don't know that it did. I can't tell you what to do. Again, you paid money to get into the game. I don't think it's something that I would ever do. I'm not going to go out there and boo a player that plays for my team. But hey, also great point by you. Now you're making some money. Maybe it's more because in the NFL, oh man, you if you go out there and don't convert 1 third down, you get the boo birds in the NFL.
Yeah, I guess you can't, since it's not technically, I'm doing air quotes for those listening, pay for play. They're not really getting paid to play football, so you can't really boo them. But we all know, wink, wink, what's going on behind the scenes. My look back, I'm going squarely to the swamp. The swamp on Saturday night was the swamp of old. You played in the swamp back when it was the swamp. At least for one night, they were able to regain the magic. It was loud. It was intimidating, caused 5 false start penalties in the first half alone, forced Tennessee to use 2 timeouts on the first drive of the second half that would have come in handy late in the game. Offside penalty on 4th and short that allows Florida to basically run the clock out. It was nice to see the home field advantage as a guy that grew up going to those games in the Swamp. But the thing that had me the most excited, Hess, I got to be honest with you, was the defense. The defense was a liability last year. They didn't have the players that they needed to compete in the SEC. They didn't have a lot of smart players and guys making mistakes on third down. I mean, no bigger illustration of that than last year on 3rd and long over and over again against your LSU Tigers that Jaden Daniels and company were able to convert. This year, they had a great game plan that Austin Armstrong put together. You know, one of the biggest things about playing Tennessee with the way that they spread the field is being able to tackle in space. And I thought Florida did a great job of tackling the football in space. And then when they didn't, rallying to the football, guys playing fast, playing their assignments with great soundness. They got beat a couple times on some plays, but that's what happens when you're playing in the SEC. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. But the majority of the check marks went to the guys in blue on the Florida defense. And I think they set a tone for the rest of the year about what they're going to be capable of. You look at number 1 in total defense in the SEC right now, the Florida Gators. It's been a while since we've seen them atop that category.
You live there in Gainesville. Your boots on the ground reporting here. There was some pressure after the Utah game, after the way that game went, and kind of the expectation coming into this year. It already created some pressure. What did this win do for the Florida Gators, for that coaching staff, for the players there in Gainesville? Was there a little bit of a deep breath this week?
Yeah, I think there was a deep breath. I think it was also clearly the marquee win for Billy Napier and his staff since coming to Gainesville the beginning of last season. I think it was also important, not only just that Florida won, it was not a fluky victory. It was one that Florida, even the first drive, they go down the field, stall, try to kick a field goal, kick the ground instead, and have some issues. But they were the dominant team. 7 of 8 on third down conversions on offense.
Yeah.
Ran the football at will. The offensive line opened up holes that were as big as the ones.
Tennessee wasn't real interested in tackling them in the second level, which is troublesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we put a lot of credence into that Virginia game in the opener of what we thought, Tennessee's improvement was on defense, what they were going to be able to do to run the football. Florida owned both lines of scrimmage, which was something that, I was concerned wouldn't be the case as a former Florida guy. But I think, when you go back and look at the way that they won the game, they were sloppy as hell out in Salt Lake City in week 1, made a ton of mistakes, self-inflicted wounds. They cleaned up their performance in this one. And I said on our show on Monday on the SEC Network, you set the bar high. This is what you're capable of doing. Mm-hmm. You don't have the ability to go backwards from here. And I think what we talk about, whether it's LSU's performance against Mississippi State, whether it was Missouri's win over K-State, some teams have shown what they're capable of. And you have to put that same representation on film every single week. Florida last year had their 2 biggest wins of the season, Texas A&M and South Carolina in back-to-back weeks, and then proceeded to go lose to Vanderbilt the very next week and Florida State to finish the season. You don't have the ability to go backwards now.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you got to really build off this. When you look at their opponent this week, obviously they're going to be a 4-touchdown favorite against Charlotte, and you got to go out there and you got to take care of business, and you need it to look good. You need it to look like a continued, well-oiled machine that can build off Tennessee, do what you're supposed to do against Charlotte as you get ready for the thick of your SEC schedule. So that is a good last call. Before we get to this week's guest here on Pregaming the SEC, I want to tell you about Richards Honda. Go to richardshonda.com. They've got something for every lifestyle, no matter what you have. If you've got 5 children like me and you want to get in that Odyssey minivan, they've got you covered. But if you need a sedan, a hybrid, whatever it might be, multiple midsize SUVs, Richards Honda and richardshonda.com is the place to go right now. You can have a chat with them right there on the website. Any question, concern you might have, they can answer that on the website, richardshonda.com, home of the warm and fuzzy feeling. All right, very excited for this week's guest on Pregaming the SEC. It's a guy that I know very well. It's one of my favorite human beings in this entire world, and he's always 318-31 great. That is my man, Ben Mintz. You probably know him as Mintzy from Barstool Sports. Mintzy, man, I am so glad to have you here on the podcast. Glad to have you back with Barstool in Chicago, living the dream, my man. You deserve everything, so I'm glad everything right now is going back in that same direction. Glad to have you on the podcast.
Man, love the positive energy. Excited to be on here. Congrats to y'all getting this podcast picked up, and excited, man. What a weekend we have in college football nationally. SEC, we got 6 ranked matchups. What could be better?
Mintzy, I'll tell you this, man. We've focused on this. We've done this podcast for 3 years. We've had Shepard Smith joined us for the Alabama Ole Miss game. That didn't turn out very well. So there's a lot of pressure on you as an Ole Miss guy to get this thing done. But before we do that, I want to go into the first time I ever met you, man. We were at SEC championship game, I think last year, and you were trying to break a time in the 40 there at SEC Fan Fest. I don't think we broke the time, but
that was the first time you met Mintzy, was the 40-yard dash.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was rough. I was wearing my lovely Blue Delta jeans, and they're comfortable jeans, best in the world. Maybe not the best for running the 40, so that's my excuse. It had nothing to do with the fact that I'm slow at all.
Well, I was going to ask you, are we
weighing me down?
Are we gonna make another run at it this year in Atlanta? Have you been training?
If we do, I'll be running a lot faster because I've been running and lifting, and I've dropped a bunch of weight this year, so I'm feeling.
Nice.
Feeling good.
Yeah.
I actually think, though, that Atlanta falls on I'm actually committed. I'm running the St. Jude half marathon in Memphis that morning. I'm going to try to raise a bunch of money for child cancer.
All right, hold on now. So what if Ole Miss makes it to the SEC championship game, man? You will have already committed yourself to doing something charitable, and you're going to miss the run there in Atlanta?
Man. I got to be honest, I should have probably thought about that more, but, gosh, I feel like I'm pretty all in on this half marathon now.
I mean,
but
hey, don't try to talk Mintzy out of doing something for charity, CD. What are you doing now?
I bet I could figure it out where if the run's in the morning and they've got those Memphis to Atlanta quick flights, maybe I can do both.
I'll tell you, though, if ever there was a year with the West being as open as it looks and Jackson Dart playing the way he's playing, I mean, this has to feel like a little season of optimism for the Rebs fans, right?
Well, it does. Okay, so this week, getting into Bama, some good injury news for Ole Miss. Ole Miss was playing without their top 2 receivers and tight end last week. They're getting Zachary Franklin. It's going to be his first game at Ole Miss. UT San Antonio transfer, had 1,400 yards last year. He was a number 5 player in the transfer portal. This is his Ole Miss. He had an offseason surgery. This is his Ole Miss debut Saturday. Also getting Caden Prescorn from Memphis, the tight ends, finally healthy. And so, obviously love the good injury news going in. Just as far as the game goes, look, I'm not saying I usually run my mouth a lot. I'm not saying a word this week. 2 years ago, before at Bama, I had like a countdown to the game, all this stuff. And Bama came out in Tuscaloosa and just beat the dog crap out of Ole Miss from pillar to post. I feel like this whole narrative, everybody's putting Bama in their grave. I mean, I don't know. I'm not, you're still going to Tuscaloosa. Ole Miss has still only won there twice in school history. I think Bama, the biggest thing that concerns me about this game is the matchup in the trenches. I don't know how good Ole Miss's run defense is yet because I don't know that you can really tell from Tulane or Georgia Tech or Mercer. And with Bama going with Milroe, the 2 years, they're going to just be physical. They're going to try to run downhill. And then Ole Miss's offensive line, the run blocking's looked super shaky the last 2 weeks against Tulane and Georgia Tech. Winshawn Judkins hadn't been able to get it going. So I'm worried about the line of scrimmage stuff. If I have concerns about the game, it's there.
Let me ask you a question real quick, Mintzy, to going back to what you said 2 years ago when they were in Tuscaloosa and got beaten so badly. I almost felt like it was Lane that got the team beaten, though, rolling the dice as many times early in the game, going for all those 4th downs. I mean, I understand being aggressive, but to some degree, he was a little careless. I mean, what have you seen in the last couple of years in terms of his evolution as a head coach and maybe understanding a little better when the risk to reward pays dividends?
I mean, he still goes for it most of the time. I mean, maybe not quite to the same level, but it seems like he's just all about trying to get 7 and being aggressive and, that up tempo and putting pressure on defenses all the time. And I think in that game 2 years ago, Bama had Bryce Young and a lot better offense. I think he thought, we just got to score 7 every time we can on the road to have a chance. And I think we'll probably see a little different strategy this year because Bama's offense doesn't have as much firepower.
How about Lane Kiffin, talking of Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss head coach, this week saying, you know what? I've worked with Kevin Steele. I've played against Kevin Steele many times. That is not his defense. That is T-Rob's defense, who's the corners coach there at Alabama. You know, the last thing that Coach Saban wanted to do, Mintzy, was answer a question like this. And now it's not only a question, it's like the question. And I think Lane, as we all know, does a really good job of knowing exactly what to say to kind of maybe change the direction of a game.
No, Lane loves to poke the bear, and Saban's such a type A, no nonsense guy. Saban hates all this stuff. So Lane, loves the Twitter stuff, throwing curveballs, talking points, and all that. I mean, he's one of the master trollers of our time. Because I've met him, a good few times now, and he's real stoic. He don't say a lot, he just loves hiding behind the keyboard to where he doesn't have to actually deal with people. He can just tweet, and so he doesn't have to talk. And man, he's so funny on there. I'm not surprised he did that at all. What's interesting to me, Jacob, I think you can make an argument that Ole Miss's top three quarterbacks are better than all three on Alabama's roster, and that is a tribute to Lane. But I mean, Walker Howard's Ole Miss's number 3. He'd start at Bama right now. I mean, that's just a crazy world to me. That's where we are.
They have quarterback issues for sure. I mean, you look across the SEC, and there's some backups to your point, Mintzy. A couple at Ole Miss maybe that would be starters, like a Garrett Nussmeier at LSU would probably be a starter. I mean, last week the move to bench Milroe and to go with Tyler Buckner felt so panicky, and then it played out to be a panic move. And then Simpson comes in, he's okay, but South Florida is getting the best of Alabama up front, which is wild to say, but Ty Simpson took a lot of hits in that game. We didn't even see Jalen Milroe. Now they're going back to Jalen Milroe. It's like when you have a run of the quarterbacks they had with Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa and Mac Jones and Bryce Young, and then now you have the quarterback carousel, these Bama fans have to have some sense of, are we going to have enough? Like in this game, even being a 7-point favorite, are we going to have enough? Because they don't have that guy right now, and they don't even have somebody that they feel comfortable about like game to game.
No, and also I think just the big thing is Saban just has lost so many coordinators through the years, and there comes a point when you're having to change offensive defensive coordinators almost every single season. Now he brings in Tommy Rees from Notre Dame, who clearly is not comfortable coaching Milroe and that skill set. He brought Buckner, I guess, who was his guy. But I feel like it's like a square peg round hole situation right now, just because he's had to change so much. I mean, there's been so many through the years.
One of the great dynamics of this matchup has to do with Pete Golding, the defensive coordinator for the Rebs. I think what we're seeing now, the Bama fans were forever on, Bill O'Brien and on Pete Golding and blaming them for maybe not being up to where they needed to be. But, with new coordinators at Alabama, still seeing some of the issues. I mean, how have you seen Pete Golding's impact on the defense there at Ole Miss? I think he's one of the best defensive minds in all of college football, just an incredibly, sharp dude to just talk to. You've always wondered, hey, if they could get any semblance of a defense there in Oxford to kind of complement what they do offensively, they got a chance to be really good. I mean, what have you seen from his fingerprint specifically on this program, and the fact that he's going to really know a lot about this offense that Alabama's going to roll out there, including some of the personnel that they'll be utilizing?
Man, I've seen a lot for a couple of weeks, because the big thing with these Lane Ole Miss teams has been you see these fast starts and then they fade in the second half, which was a huge thing last year. And now with Pete Golding making defensive adjustments, that Tulane game, I mean, Tulane was up 17-10 at half. I went to New Orleans. Their backup quarterback was lighting Ole Miss up, wasn't getting touched in the first half. Golding went in there, made big adjustments, and just said, we're about to blitz the crap out of this guy the whole second half, and held Tulane to a field goal in the second half. And I thought that was something, making those second half adjustments you hadn't seen necessarily in the past. And I thought he did a good job with that, even though, Georgia Tech was only 10-3 at the half. They had their first half, they had 3 long drives and only got 3 points. They were moving the ball. I thought he did a good job again with that. And I think the other thing, man, Golding's an ace recruiter. He's killing the transfer portal, and he's bringing in, he's really bringing in some serious talent. So I think, so far, got to be thrilled with him. And last year, Chris Kiffin, Lane's brother, took the defensive coordinator job, left the Cleveland Browns D-line coaching job, came back for 6 weeks and said, the hell with this NIL world, the hell. I don't know if there's a family thought. He left, and Ole Miss had to promote Chris Partridge, who's a NIL guy, DB coach. good guy, motivator, but maybe not ready for this coordinator. And so I think the upgrade from Partridge to him is maybe the biggest story so far of this team.
Mintzy, I know that you're trying to, lightly step into this game, maybe not make as big of a deal as you've made in the past, but I'll do that for you. When I look at this line, I can't believe that Alabama is a full touchdown favorite. I can't. I understand if it was a 3-point spread because they're at home, they're Alabama. I realize who they are and the standard that they've been. But if you just watch the all 22 of both these teams, Ole Miss right now is the better team. And so I know you don't want to maybe step out and step up and say a lot about this game, but what's a path for Ole Miss? Like if you said, okay, this has got to be the blueprint for them to go out there, be successful, and beat Alabama, what do you think has to happen?
Well, I like Ole Miss in 7. I wouldn't say I love it, but I do like it, getting a full 7, because like you said, 7's a lot. I think the biggest thing in this game is when you look at how Alabama is designed as a team, they are not designed to play from behind this offense. I mean, they can run the ball, but Milroe's not a good thrower. If Ole Miss gets up 7-14-0 early and makes Bama have to throw it and takes that crowd out of it, I mean, I don't think they're designed to come back. I think Alabama, for them to win, they got to come out, get the crowd involved early, run it down Ole Miss's throat, and play with the lead. I just don't think this team's designed to play from behind. And then I look at Ole Miss, man, Jackson Dart. So Ole Miss's quarterback depth, because they got Spencer Sanders and Howard behind them, Lane's running Dart like crazy. And it's like,
great point. Yeah.
It's really opening the offense, having Dart running. He had like 150 yards last week. And so, because he has confidence in Sanders and Howard behind him, he really can open up that playbook. And so Dart, he's throwing good deep balls, and I think he's improving as a passer. But I think his factor with his legs is going to be huge for picking up some key third down conversions in this game.
You mentioned the history of this rivalry and the fact that they've only won there twice in the history of going to Tuscaloosa. How much do you think the mental side of thing plays in there, the weight of that, knowing the history? Or do you think that this year, with so many vulnerabilities being shown, on the Alabama side, that maybe the mental advantage is on Ole Miss's side as it relates to maybe a little blood in the water and being able to feel more confident, almost like, once Mike Tyson got beat or Tiger Woods lost to Y.E. Yang on a Sunday, those things showing that guys are beatable, can help maybe the mental side of things for Ole Miss.
Yeah, and look, Ole Miss should have won this game last year. This game in Oxford was right. It was the week after Alabama lost to LSU in that OT, the OT thriller. Ole Miss dominated the first half, and right before the half, Zach Evans fumbled like inside Ole Miss's 20, and Bama got kind of a cheap touchdown to cut it to 17-14 before the half. And then Ole Miss, the game, Ole Miss lost by 6 and down on the Bama 15. So I don't think Ole Miss is going to be scared of them. They could have won last year. And I think your point is right. It's like when you have someone that's so dominant, once they start falling, everybody wants to beat them, because Bama's dominated forever. The only concern I have, though, is everybody's putting Bama in their grave this week. And, I'm just not quite willing to go that far yet.
All right, Mintzy, I know you have a ton of different things going on, so not going to be able to be in Tuscaloosa watching the game, but I think you're going to maybe be at another SEC game.
Yeah.
But how are you taking in this game? Is it going to be so much pressure where it's the only thing you can focus on? Are you going to try to maybe eye hustle it a little bit? How are you taking in Ole Miss, Alabama?
I'm going to a humongous tailgate on your campus in Baton Rouge, and they've got TVs there, and I'm going to watch it tailgating in Baton Rouge, and I'm going to go to LSU, Arkansas Saturday night. I'm only in the South for about 5-6 more weeks, so I plan to enjoy football season, and I'm hitting Saints games, LSU, and I hope to see you in Oxford next week for LSU Ole Miss too.
Yeah.
So I'll be at a tailgate in Baton Rouge, fired up, shoot some content, and then I'm going to go see this LSU Arkansas game that, I feel like everybody's giving LSU the credit for the win already because that Arkansas lost at home to BYU last week. But Jacob, very well, Arkansas always fights in Baton Rouge.
Yep.
It's one of those things where, I've seen LSU be a 24 and 30-point favorite this game go to the wire. So, I think LSU will win, but I don't know that they'll cover the 18 or whatever.
Yeah, it's a big number. And unfortunately, I've been on the other side of Arkansas coming in as an unranked team, being the number 1 team in the country and losing in triple overtime. Now, there's no Darren McFadden, Felix Jones, Peyton Hillis out there for Arkansas. But yes, Mintzy, I agree with you. That series, it's always wild. It doesn't matter. You and I growing up, in Louisiana. Like we saw this game when LSU was supposed to win by whatever the number was. Arkansas throws a Hail Mary one year, whatever it might be. So yeah, 18, I'm staying far away from that number.
One thing on Arkansas though, and this is like it's similar with Coach O at LSU and Sam Pittman at Arkansas. And you got like a fiery players coach. It's like a line guy. The players like not a coordinator though. You know, he doesn't run the offense or defense.
Right.
They lost Kendall Briles and Barry Odom. I think the offense is fine with Jefferson, but losing Barry Odom, he was an elite defensive coordinator. Their defense looked like crap last week against BYU, and I think their defense may have maybe fallen off a cliff a little bit this year.
Hey, Mintz, before we let you go, man, I'd be remiss not to ask you about your personal life. You mentioned earlier the workouts and some of the weight you've lost, and I'm interested about the last year, you know, the turmoil you've been through, the path that you've kind of traveled back to Barstool now, you know, what that's done to improve you as a person and maybe some of the loyalty that your coworkers there at Barstool have shown you.
Yeah, you know, the ironic thing about it is I'm not really a very compared to Barstool, I'm you'd think one of the least controversial people up here. I mean, I make a point to not curse on air and stuff. You know, our guys are so edgy. It was very ironic that I was the one that got in the scandal of like all the employees at Barstool. You would have kind of like, if there were odds on that, I feel like I would have been on the low end. Obviously, I mean, that was a wild thing to go through. You know, there's no doubt about it. I had like the Monday morning when I slipped on air, I had like the first couple hours. I mean, I was kind of almost panic attack level. I was that upset about it. I calmed down Monday afternoon. Even when they let me know I was getting let go Wednesday, I still was kind of at peace about it. You know, I mean, Jacob will get that. I mean, I'm a Christian, and I think that helped me a lot going through it because it's like God doesn't promise that you'll have no storms. He just promises peace in the storms. And I felt pretty peaceful, even going through a national scandal. And it was interesting. I was like, man, I better get my poker game sharp because I used to be a professional poker player. I was like, because nobody's going to hire me for 5 years after this thing. And it actually ended up being kind of the opposite. I had a bunch of job offers because I think people gave my character the benefit of the doubt. And then anybody that saw the incident, you could see I was reading myself. There was no intent. And, you know, it really just makes me feel grateful all the support I got. I mean, you wouldn't believe how much support I got. And then Dave Portnoy, you know, rehiring me back a few weeks later for Brick Watch. And, you know, I ended up having this crazy summer where I played World Series of Poker and worked for Poker Go. And, you know, it was all over the country. And, you know, I kind of, I was spiraling. I will say this, I'll share this. In June in Vegas, I was spiraling a little bit. And I quit drinking like 3.5 years ago. I didn't start drinking again, but I was like I picked up a nicotine pen habit a little bit. And that's not something I was ever really into, but I guess it was like stress or something, but I was like hitting it all the time. And I wasn't eating healthy and I wasn't really exercising. And I like mentally, I was just like, I had no chance at the poker tables. I just mentally wasn't right. And then kind of in late June, I had one of those like life moments where I'm like, okay, enough of this BS. Like you've come so far in life. Like, what are you doing to yourself? And, you know, I threw away the nicotine pen. I started on the low carb diet in late June. And like now I'm on week 13. I've dropped 25 pounds. I mean, I'm lifting, I'm running 10 to 15 miles a week. I mean, I'm making like maybe one diet mistake a week. I'm just not eating sugar. And I mean, I'm 40. I feel like I'm anti-aging. I feel a hell of a lot better at 40 than I did at 35. And then like all this is going on, you know, I look up, I basically got paid by 3 companies this summer, make more money, drop 20 or 25 pounds, and then Dave gets Barstool back and I'm back. And so it's like to go through, like, I mean, it's a roller coaster. You just can't even imagine, you know, just highs and lows. But, you know, I don't know that I've ever been more encouraged than I am right now. So it's
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, man.
In Chicago, when you know you told me this 2 months ago, like I wasn't even with Barstool, and now, you know, I'm moving my life again.
Yeah.
But you know, like Jacob, I don't have 5 kids and a wife at home, so you know, if I feel like it seems like the right move to move, you know, with us building a new office, and the remote thing for Barstool is kind of dead because now we don't have the Penn properties, the Barstool Sportsbook app in Louisiana anymore. And for me, I mean, they didn't tell me I had to move, but like Big Cat and our top guys were like, we want you here, like for your career, you want to do this. And if I'm hearing that from Big Cat, and our CEO, Erica, and PFT and our top guys, like, I think it would be a very, very dumb move to not listen to them. Just my thoughts.
All right, there he is, my guy, Ben Mintz at Stool Mintzy on Twitter. Give him a follow there. I promise you won't be disappointed. I have known Mintzy for a long time, since our humble beginnings doing local radio in Shreveport, Louisiana. Man, he is a survivor. He is dedicated to what he is doing. He's loyal. I can promise you that as well. So, Mintzy, we appreciate you hopping on with us, brother. It means a lot.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And, hope to see you in Oxford next week, Jacob. It'll certainly be fun.
Absolutely would be, and even more fun if LSU beats Arkansas and Ole Miss beats Alabama. Man, that would be the ultimate. I mean, that might be a game day type situation.
If Ole Miss beats Bama, oh my gosh, that LSU Ole Miss, I'll just show it. Look, the Egg Bowl in the state of Mississippi. I mean, the hatred it's epic. But I'm a Louisiana guy. LSU Ole Miss is always my favorite game of the year. It's I feel like 80% of the people I'm close with in the world are either associated with either school. And so, that LSU weekend's no matter what, it's always my favorite weekend of the year. So,
yeah, I mean, I would not hate if that was a game in which both teams were coming off a win. I mean, again, that could be like a college game day type situation. Mintzy, we appreciate it, brother.
All right. Thank y'all.
All right, now we're finally at the time where we're pre-gaming, the pre-gaming portion of Pregaming the SEC, where we look at the Week 4 slate and all across college football. We've got some great matchups, but here within the SEC, we have matchups that are going to tell a story. And let's go over those matchups now. And to do so, we bring in our guy, Big Terp. Big Terp, where do you want to start? I mean, a lot to choose from.
A lot to choose from, and we're going to get into all of the big ones: Bama, Ole Miss, Auburn, A&M, LSU, Arkansas. But before we do that, I want a real quick rapid fire. Give me a sentence, a yes or a no. Are you expecting any sort of letdown for Charlotte, for Florida hosting Charlotte? Or they're a 28-point favorite. Any sort of letdown or no?
I am pointing firmly at you, Christopher Doring.
I could see that happen. I could see, that there's been the inconsistencies in Florida's play last year. I would like to think that's not the case. That's part of being a great team, is learning how to play to a level of your own expectation instead of the level of the opponent on the other sideline. But I'm not ready to commit to that yet, Hess.
I don't think they struggle. I mean, it's a 4-touchdown spread. If they win by 21 or 24, sure, why not? It's all about how it looks. I don't really care about the final score. How does it look? Are you still running the ball? Are you still playing that style of defense? And so for me, I think they actually take care of business. If they don't cover the 28, okay, whatever. If it's 21 points, but it looks like it's supposed to, we're good.
I'll say this, though. The one thing I'm excited about in that not having a letdown, it's not a noon kick. It's a 7:00 start under the lights again. I think everybody that went to the game last week enjoyed being in that atmosphere. So even though it's not an opponent that, typically would elicit a lot of excitement, I think fans want to kind of relive some of that hype that they had from last weekend.
One more rapid fire. Tennessee hosts UTSA. Peter Burns, Roadrunners. 1 week from today, are we talking about Tennessee scuffling on offense against a lesser opponent again? Or are we saying man, that was what we've been looking for?
UTSA is not the team I thought they were going to be this year. They've already got 2 losses. I truly thought they would be maybe a group of 5 representative in the New Year's 6. They're not that. I think Tennessee's fine. They'll get back on track.
Well, I don't know that they're going to lose the game, but until they can start doing the simple things, throwing, catching, and blocking.
Those are pretty simple things.
Yeah, to throw the ball accurately, catch the football when you have a chance, and block the guy you're supposed to.
Yeah,
I'm not so sure we don't look at their offense as just muddling another week.
Look, and I said it in the preseason, and I caught some flack for it. Of the teams that we were talking about, and of the quarterbacks that we talked about, Joe Milton had an opportunity to be fraudulent. He did, to the standard that we had built of him. Yeah, he looked very good at the Manning Passing Academy, throwing it how far he did, but you got to put it all together. Now, not all of this falls on him. He's a quarterback, so he's going to catch a lot of strays.
Yeah.
As a team, they've got to do better. I believe in Josh Heupel. I believe in his offensive system, but they've got to get it figured out quickly or it's a big slide.
I'll say this, Hess. There were times that my teams in the 90s, the players that were in the fun and gun were labeled as system players, whether you're talking about quarterbacks, whether you're talking about receivers, you're products of the system, you're putting up big stats because of the system. Well, what you're seeing this year is what the system does when you don't have the right players to run that system. But gone is Hendon Hooker, gone is Jalen Hyatt, gone is Cedric Tillman, and you're seeing those positions struggle to the point you're not seeing the same rhythm or production. Like this team averaged 49 points a game on offense. They scored 16 on Saturday against Florida.
One thing, just real quick on Missouri before we dive into the SEC battles. We talked about them before in last call, but they host Memphis. Not even host; it's in St. Louis. It's a neutral site game.
Yeah,
we talked all last week about how that was the biggest game of Eli Drinkwitz's tenure. They win it. Now they're 3-0 against 3-0 Memphis. 7:30 p.m. on ESPNU. Is this now the biggest game of his tenure, or did you see what you needed to see from them last week and you're just cool with a hard-fought game? That's cool. Or do you need to see them win again?
No, I think you got to see him win again. And, he actually called out the fans too, showing up in St. Louis. You showed up in Como. You supported the team an 11 a.m. start that they desperately needed that support and home field advantage. Now show up in St. Louis. So, if you're going to ask a lot of your fans, you got to ask the same of your team, and you got to ask the same of your coaches. I thought Kirby Moore did a great job of play calling. They were aggressive. They were creative. They let Brady Cook make plays. I want to see that.
They let
same
him
level.
cook. It was right there for you. They let him cook. I mean,
they let him cook. They let Brady cook. But I thought the same was true on defense. Blake Baker, they brought pressure. Anytime you saw him having some success early, they started heating him up, and that's where they had more of the ability to disrupt some of the rhythm that Howard, the quarterback, had. So I want to see that same level of aggressiveness this week against Memphis.
Yeah, quickly, Hennigan, the quarterback, and they've got Watson, a running back for Memphis. Two talented players, two guys that can go out there and be successful. You can't let them be successful. Missouri, you had the biggest win so far for the SEC. You got to go out there and have another performance and follow that up. That's how you build a program. That's how you become not just like a little nice story. Oh man, cool. They beat Kansas State. That's how you become like maybe in the conversation of fighting to get to the point where we're talking about you in the same vein of some of those teams trying to catch Georgia, like Tennessee and Florida, the teams trying to catch Alabama for so long, and LSU and Ole Miss. You want to get into that conversation, you got to take care of business in games like this.
You got the biggest win of the conference slate. If you lose to Memphis, is it the biggest loss of the conference season so far?
Probably so.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think so.
Yeah. Don't let that happen.
All right. We got 12 p.m. Eastern kicks. Let's go to that 11 a.m. local in Nashville, Vanderbilt, Kentucky. When Vanderbilt was sitting there at 2-0, looking at Wake Forest, UNLV, Kentucky, Missouri, who seemed gettable, Florida seemed gettable. It was feeling pretty good. Then they dropped two in a row. And now it's Kentucky, Missouri, and Florida, who were feeling completely different ways about 2 weeks later. So this is a really big one for Vanderbilt at home. It's also the first test, I guess, for Kentucky. We're still not exactly sure what they're working with. We've liked it so far. But 11 a.m. Central kick in Nashville. What are you thinking? And we got a 13.5 favorite for Kentucky. What are you thinking in this one?
I'll say this, Hess. First and foremost, if Vanderbilt wants to be competitive, they got to stop turning the football over. They're not a good enough team to make the mistakes that they did against Wake Forest or the mistakes they made against UNLV on Saturday night out in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
But with that being said, they beat Kentucky last year, and this Kentucky team so far has left me feeling a little empty. You and I were both high on what Devin Leary was going to be able to do with Liam Cohen, and Ray Davis has been one of the real consistent bright spots of this Kentucky team. You're still seeing protection issues up front. You're still seeing penalties. You're seeing drop balls, missed throws. At the end of the game, you go back and you look at Devin Leary's numbers, and he's throwing 3 or 4 touchdowns a game, but it just doesn't feel that gratifying as you're watching it. It's time for Kentucky to put together a complete 60 minutes, and no better team than to do it against than the one that you let get away last year and allowed Vanderbilt to get their first SEC win in years.
I know that has to be frustrating for Coach Stoops. The fact that, at the end of the day, like you're winning these games, you're putting up stats, but it doesn't look clean. It looks clunky. And like you said, CD, there's not like 4 quarters of football. And there's been some games. I mean, Eastern Kentucky was one of the worst tapes I've watched so far this year. It just didn't show up at all. And guys that I know are playmakers, you can't play down to your opponent. Now, Kentucky has played up to their opponent in a couple of games over the last couple of years, which is great to see, but you can't play down to your opponent. Kentucky, you're a 2-touchdown favorite on the road. Go win by 2 touchdowns. Go be dominant. Go win this game. Go show that you are the team we thought you could be in the offseason. Vanderbilt, right now, look, they just lost on the road to UNLV, right? They didn't show up against Wake Forest in the second half. They're a team that can be got. Go get them.
All right. If you're looking up and down this slate, there's no way you can make a real argument that Ole Miss-Alabama is not just the best game.
No, that's why we just talked about it for 20 minutes with Ben Mintz.
But I would hear out an argument that Auburn A&M is just as good of a game because
it's important for both narratives of both teams. Yeah.
Like I just said, like Kentucky, we haven't really seen that test yet. Auburn, we saw against Cal. I mean, if you were awake, which obviously we all were, dedicated.
Yeah.
But this is a big one. Kyle Field, and then Texas A&M. We're trying to figure out if they're the boy who cried wolf after 3 weeks. Like, are they legitimate? Can they get in? West is wide open. So if A&M wins this at home over Auburn, they're right back in that mix. If Auburn's 4-0 with a win in College Station, they're in that mix. A&M's 7.5-point favorite. How do you think this one goes?
That's the problem with this game is that we really don't know what to believe about either of these teams. We've seen things that we feel really good about, like Texas A&M's offense, specifically Connor Wegman and what he's done to start the season. We've seen Auburn's defense look fantastic through the first 3 games of the season, but then we see things that we don't like. A&M's secondary against Miami, watching, Auburn turn the football over multiple times down in the red zone. I don't necessarily believe in their quarterbacks or receivers for that matter. So one of the things that I think that you have to be able to try to exploit if you're going to beat Texas A&M is that secondary. And I don't think the matchup's good for Auburn because of the quarterback play being limited and the receivers being average at best. I think that's a position that Freeze is going to look to upgrade significantly in the offseason. I go back to the quarterback. I don't know why Spencer Sanders didn't choose to go to Auburn. I mean, Spencer Sanders came down to Auburn and Ole Miss. He's largely going to be sitting behind Jackson Dart the entirety of the season. I would have loved to seen him in that Auburn offense under Hugh Freeze and Philip Montgomery. But forget about that. This year's team, I don't think it's a good matchup for Auburn. Because I just don't think they do the things that are going to be able to take advantage of where Texas A&M's discrepancies are.
Yeah, when you look at the receiver room for Auburn, that place has had some really good ones in the past, but it feels like it's been a long time since they've had that, hey, this guy's going to go take over the game, right? And you need that, but now with this room, I think you're just looking for somebody that can have big moments within a game, not even take over the game. I mean, you got Jay Fair right now, who's the leading receiver with 174 yards. I mean, you heard it in Hold My Beer segment. I mean, Malik Neighbors had 239 last week.
Yeah.
And we're talking about 174 leading your team after 3 weeks. Peyton Thorne's the leading rusher on this team, CD, with 140 yards. Like, that's not even his game. Now, credit to him. He's gone out there and done that. But offensively, can they, if it gets into a shootout, like, because Miami A&M, that's kind of what that was. I mean, over 70 points scored in that game. Can Auburn do that right now? I don't think that they can. And Peyton Thorne hasn't been bad. I think he's been efficient at times. I mean, he's not really getting the ball in the end zone. To your point, the red zone offense, he's throwing for more yards than it would probably say as far as successful trips to the red zone. The yards kind of are misleading there, but if I'm Texas A&M, I am daring them to turn this into a track meet, which sounds weird saying that for Texas A&M, but I think their best players on offense, obviously Wegman, a quarterback, but the receiver room is probably where they have their most depth.
How about the receivers too? Another receiver steps up. Ja'Day Walker goes over 100 yards to complement what Anaya Smith did, also going over the century mark.
Yeah,
it's an embarrassment of riches when you talk about the wide receiving core for Texas A&M, and I think there's a real chemistry and rhythm developing in the offense and that rapport between the quarterback, Connor Wegman, and those wide receivers in that group.
Yeah, I think I like A&M in this matchup. I think it favors them. I think where Auburn's at right now, and Auburn is probably a step ahead of where people had them. And defensively, I think certainly they're not far away from winning a game like this on the road, but I just don't think they're there yet.
All right, let's talk about that game that Mintzy is actually going to be at. Your LSU Tigers hosting.
Yeah, I'm going to be there too, Big Turb. And just chop liver here on the podcast.
I mean, that is the most assumed thing of all time. If anybody's coming here, they're saying, wow, I'd like to hear Mintzy.
Okay, I'm kidding.
Going to Alabama, Ole Miss, but no. He will be in Baton Rouge. I guess the way I'll set this one up is LSU 17.5 points better than Arkansas?
Yeah, that's a large number, CD. That's a big number in a game in which you and I talked about it on off campus earlier in the week. That is just a game that Arkansas always shows up for. They always do. Ranked, not ranked, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. That's always a close game. At least it feels like it's always a close game. Last year, LSU was a much better team last year. That was a dog
13-10, right? 13-10 was the final.
I mean, it was Harold Perkins 13, Arkansas 10 in that game. I mean, it was a real struggle for LSU to get out of Fayetteville with a victory. They did, but that's what this game is. And so I'm not even looking at the line. I'm just looking at, can LSU offensively continue to be highly efficient, defensively, horrible run fits in the first 2 weeks, shored everything up last week, had a couple new players in there. True freshman Whit Weeks got his first start in his first SEC game. That looked much better against Mississippi State, a team that had been running the ball extremely well with Woody Marks to that point. So I think they're going to have advantages in this game. I think LSU wins this game. I don't know about by 17.5. Again, that's just a large point spread in a contest that's usually pretty close. I mean, yeah, you're going to have a blowout here and there, but for the most part, I mean, at least when I was in school and in the years leading into the last couple have been close battles. So I think LSU has the advantages there. It would take KJ Jefferson having one of his better performances, I think. And we still don't know the status of Rocket Sanders.
That's what I was going to say. It's Wednesday night that we're recording this. I don't know that we've had an update on his availability. I think largely the run game has been a little disappointing to me. I mean, that's one of the bread and butter cornerstones of the Sam Pittman team over the last couple of years. AJ Green has that big run to start the game off against BYU. And I think that's one of the things we haven't talked about. It's just how disappointing that BYU loss was. I mean, you're up 14-0 after a long run from AJ Green, and a punt return for a touchdown stakes you that 2-touchdown lead. You even have a 10-point lead late in the third quarter, and you give up 17 unanswered to lose that ball game, largely because KJ Jefferson throws a horrible interception that sets up BYU's offense in a short field situation. So I need to know whether Rocket Sanders is going to be back. I need to see the offensive line block better in the run game. But honestly, it's another matchup that I don't think is very good, because the storyline last year for Arkansas was how bad they were in the secondary. They looked better in the first 2 games of the season, but BYU kind of had their way throwing the football with them. And I think that you look at what developed in Starkville last week, that rhythm feeling back between the quarterback and his receivers, and what Neighbors was able to do. Lacey had a big catch as well. Like I feel like Brian Thomas, those guys, they made some plays again. So I think, if Arkansas is going to stay within that 17-point number, it's going to be because the secondary plays a lot better than they did against BYU.
47% of the time, Arkansas plays cover one. A lot of our listeners listening right now, you know what that means, but if you don't, it is man across the board with one single high safety. Here's the deal. You're counting on your corners and safeties to cover that LSU receiver room that CD just talked about. And also, LSU doesn't attack the middle of the football field very often. So cover one is really good about stopping like a dig route over the middle of the football field. Well, LSU doesn't try to really attack that area. Can they switch it up? Will they switch it up? Because they've been a team, again, 47% of the time in one coverage in 3 weeks. That's who you are. That's your identity. If they do that, I think LSU has a lot of success on the outside with those receivers that we've talked about.
All right, 2 more here. I think through 3 games, South Carolina is my favorite. Just no criteria, just my favorite. They're all over the place sometimes. From 9 sacks against North Carolina to going into the halftime with a lead over Georgia, and Shane Beamer just straight up saying, we're kicking their asses. I love them. They're hosting Mississippi State, Williams-Brice at night. It's going to be electric. They're both 0-1 in the SEC now, though. So somebody's getting on the board, somebody's falling to 0-2. So this is a pivotal East-West matchup, 7:30 p.m. on SEC Network. Cox favored by 6.5 points. What do you think?
Big Term, I called for accountability earlier.
Yeah.
I need to go back and bring some accountability, because I thought South Carolina was a sitting duck for what Georgia was going to be able to do to their offensive line after watching the struggles in week 1 against North Carolina. They did a great job of kind of changing the game plan. A lot of some quick short passes. They were able to negate some of the pressure.
Yeah.
The offensive line did block better, to the point that you saw Georgia, kind of change up what they were doing. A lot of the pressure they got in the second half came on a lot of twists and stunts on the defensive line. So I give them credit, and we shouldn't have doubted them, Hess. Like Shane Beamer, one of the best at rallying his squad. You go back to last year, that South Carolina Florida game was probably the low point for the Gamecocks. Yeah. And they come back after that and find a way to win in successive weeks against Tennessee and Clemson. So We should have known they'd had him ready to go, but I didn't give him credit, and for that I apologize.
Well, look, they're a peaks and valleys program right now. There's certainly valleys within the program, and the Florida game is one that you can kind of point back to. But those peaks, and I put it out there on Twitter, they be peaking.
Yeah.
I mean, they are high peaks.
Yeah.
That's just what South Carolina, when you count them out, they go have a performance like they had. Now they couldn't figure it out in the second half. They got a little gassed, and Georgia did a really nice job.
Yeah, they don't have
enough on either line. They don't have enough.
And even playmakers wise, it would have been nice to have Juice Wells the entirety of the game. The ironic part is that he's feeling great before the game, playing well, gets an early screen that he takes to the house and breaks his foot on a touchdown run. Would have been nice. I wanted to see those guys with Xavier Legette playing as well as he is right now, and being able to kind of complement what Juice can do when he's healthy. I would have liked to have seen that. But you're right; they kind of just ran out of gas and ran out of real playmakers.
Yeah. Spencer Rattler, though, tough as hell. Like that guy has turned me into a huge fan of his.
Yeah, I've gained so much respect for him this year. The way that he's kind of put the team on his back. They have no semblance of a run game whatsoever, and they're able to still be competitive. And so I give him credit for his toughness, his resiliency, his leadership. I think he's matured a lot from the guy that we saw come into to Norman, Oklahoma a few years back.
Yeah,
but if you had to rank the quarterbacks in the SEC right now, where would Rattler be on that list 3 games in?
He'd probably, 3 or 4. I mean, I think what Jackson Dart and Jaden Daniels are doing, I still have them.
Connor Wegman's ahead of
in whatever order 1, 2. Well, Rattler and Wegman would be like 3 or 4. I think. Well, any combination. We could play it out a million different ways.
I think Rattler's 4 probably.
Closer to 4, probably, than 3, if you ask me. Yeah. Connor Wegman, he's done some big things. I know that they're not undefeated by any means, and I know some of that's going to fall on the quarterback, but you watch the tape, he's playing his what off.
Hey, and since we're talking quarterbacks, let's stay on that theme with Will Rogers. He was one of the top quarterbacks returning in the league this year. You made a great point last week, just didn't really look comfortable in this offense. Mm-hmm. What did he throw for 39% completions, I think, on Saturday against LSU's defense? The plan's simple. The plan for LSU was simple. The plan for the rest of the season is simple. For South Carolina, stop the run. Stop the run and force Will Rogers to beat you in a passing game that he doesn't feel comfortable in, that's limited with playmakers as vertical threats down the field. The offensive line largely was recruited to be an air raid style, trying to transition into a little more physical pro style attack. Clayton White's defense this week is just, they gotta win up front in the run game, and then pin your ears back and go get Will Rogers. They were able to sack him last week. LSU was 4 times, created a bunch of pressure on him. I think the blueprint's been laid out by your Tigers, and I think South Carolina's going to try to replicate this week.
Yeah, it was an LSU team that only had 1 sack coming in. They get 4 in that game. Will Rogers, 11-28, 103 yards, 3.7 yards an attempt, 7.6 QBR, no touchdowns. We're talking about one of the guys that was about to set every SEC record, might end up on the bench for Mike Wright, just because the offense and how it's ran, it just does not fit who he is, who the offensive line is. Like, I give Woody Marks credit because he's out there making plays, but man, that it was almost painful to watch. It was painful to watch. Like, Will Rogers, a guy that we respect so much, a guy that's made so many plays in the SEC, just go out there and look helpless. Yeah. That was one of the worst offensive performances as a team that we've seen over the last couple of years in the SEC.
Yeah, he looked like almost a broken man, and
he really did.
He was out there. So anxious to see if they can get it back on track. Zach Arnett was very pointed with his criticism in all phases, and he's kind of a no nonsense dude. So I expect them to take some accountability, and anxious to see how they make some corrections this week.
Yeah.
All right. The game of the week, talked about it with Mintzy for a good 15-20 minutes. Number 15, Ole Miss at number 13, Alabama. When this thing opened up, it was like 9.5, 10. I believe that's where Jacob Hester grabbed it.
Yes.
Then it started coming down a bit. I got it at 7.5 as we sit here on Wednesday night, 6.5. It's obviously in favor of Alabama. Do need to clarify that based on how things have been going. Yeah. Because it's Alabama, it seems impossible that they wouldn't just go out there and cover at home. But based on how we've seen them play, it seems impossible, but they could cover 7 against Ole Miss. So as we head into this game, Alabama favored by 6.5 in Bryant-Denny. How do you think this one goes?
All right. So a lot of first or been a long time things as well for Coach Saban this year. Over 7,000 days. They haven't had a double-digit loss at home. Well, now they have one. Okay. That's almost a 20-year streak. First time in 128 weeks, they're not in the AP top 10. That's going back to September of 2015. Now, both the times we're talking about, 03 national championship at LSU, 15 in Alabama national championship. And so I understand like holding on to that hope if you're an Alabama fan. But I say that to say this. Those teams still look different on tape.
Yeah.
Like I still turned on 03 LSU and I saw, Corey Webster out there playing corner, Marcus Spears playing edge rusher, Kyle Williams in the interior of that defense. I saw Michael Clayton on offense. I saw Matt Mock play quarterback. Turned to 2015 Alabama. I mean, we could go through player. I don't see those same things on tape.
Yeah.
They have got to show a different style and a different mentality in this game if they want to have a chance. I mean that. Last week was really the first time that I've ever seen a Nick Saban-led team play like that and not really be affected by their poor play. Like go through the motions type things, and that's just not what you see from Alabama, from Nick Saban. And if they show up and play even related to that performance that they had in Tampa last week, they'll get beat, and they'll get beat pretty easy. I mean, this is a team that has to ramp it up to an 11. You're at home.
Yeah.
You've got talented players. Now, settle on Jalen Milroe being your quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Let him go out there and be the best version of himself. Tommy Reese, it's on you, buddy.
Yeah.
Figure out what he does well. Call that game plan within your skill set of players. You do that, you play to the level that you can with the mentality that you know you have to play for Coach Saban, you'll be okay. If you don't, Ole Miss is good enough to beat you. No doubt about it.
Hess, you're not an Alabama guy. I'm not an Alabama guy. You did play for Coach Saban. But if I were an Alabama guy, I would be embarrassed at the representation that these players have put on tape of what it means to put on that uniform. You mentioned it. There's no real sense of urgency. Mm-hmm. You know, we heard after the Texas game players saying we didn't have a good week of practice. We weren't focused. Like, how are you not focused getting ready for one of the biggest opponents on your schedule? Then you come back after a clunker and you play even worse in a lot of ways against the team that's way below you from a skill set standpoint. Yeah. The players only meeting that they had. I don't know about you. I hate players. I fucking hate player only meetings. Like, it drives me crazy that these guys are out here talking about, oh, we got together as a team. Who's the leader? Who's the leader in that locker room? The players only meeting that's deciding. You know, there's no Bryce Young in there. There's no Will Anderson. Dallas Turner's got some swag, but like, where are these leaders that didn't get them right in practice when they were leading up to Texas? Like, it's embarrassing. And if I were an Alabama alum that built that dynasty there, I would be fuming mad.
Yeah, you've seen some take to social media and be like, this is not the team that I know. This is not the program that I know. I know how they're being coached every single day. Hey, players, Alabama, it's on you. You got to go out there and have a good performance. Again, this can do. Ole Miss has won twice in that building in Tuscaloosa. Okay, you don't think this means a lot to them? You don't think that they realize that they have an opportunity if they win this game? They're in the driver's seat of the SEC West. They've never been to Atlanta, right? It's a trip that you plan every single year. When you're making your schedule, you play for Alabama. You're on that staff. You say, "Oh, you got to what that weekend? I can't go. I'm going to be in Atlanta. We're going to be in the SEC championship game." Well, Ole Miss has never been there, not one time. That would mean everything to those players, that program, that coaching staff.
If not now, win for Ole Miss.
No question.
If you've won twice in Tuscaloosa in the history of your program, if not now, win. With as much blood as in the water right now, sharks circling. If not now, win. I think it comes down to two things in the matchup, right? The offensive line for Ole Miss. I worry about their ability to hold up. They have not looked good on tape. They haven't run the ball consistently. You know, what will that look like on and not only pass protection, but their ability to run? The health of Quinshon Judkins. Can they get a little bit more balance there? They used a lot of Jackson Dart quarterback run stuff in the first half to build up, you know, some of the run production that they had. And then secondly, what's Alabama's secondary look like against probably the best group of receivers cumulatively that they may see all year long? The rhythm that Jackson Dart has, the relationship that he has with those guys. Did they get Trey Harris back? They get the transfer from UTSA, who's finally eligible to play. there's going to be a lot of really talented wide receivers that are running at a group that's been a little shaky in that back end for Alabama.
Hey, Ole Miss, Alabama. This game is up, blinking on the marquee behind us. Play like that. Live up to that. Embrace that. This is a game that if you are the winner, again, like you are in a great spot in the SEC West, right? Because it feels chaotic. We're expecting it to be chaotic. The energy is all over the place, okay? You win this one, you're in the driver's seat. I hope that it is a game that lives up to all the hype. All right, Big Terp. We've pre-gamed. We've last called. We've held beers. Best bets. Do we have to go there? I mean, I got this flag football team I got to go coach. I mean, do we really need to go over it right now?
I'll just recap.
Look, here's the deal. I'm over. Okay. I haven't won a game since Moby Dick was a minnow. Okay.
Yes.
I have not been good at predicting the SEC this year. The SEC in the non-conference has let me down. I'll take the blame, but you've got to hold your part up as well. Okay. Now we're in conference play, undefeated week. Guaranteed.
What's the name of this segment?
Best bets.
No. The name of the segment is Take It to the Bank.
Take it to the bank.
Take it to the bank. The bank's knocking on your door. It's repo time. Hess, we got to come for all that stuff. We lent you money. We had confidence in you. The bank is showing up, beating down the door. My friend, time to turn the tide. Get back on track, right? If not now, when, right? This is the week. Same thing I said to Ole Miss. Same applies to you, my friend.
Week 4, having the challenge of getting back to 500 is a nice baked-in contest. CD's 4 and 5. Hess is something or other.
I'm over. I have not won a game.
3-0 week, and I hated last week that we were going against one another. I took Missouri, you took Kansas State. One of us was due to win. Luckily for us, the SEC team.
I went against the conference because I had gone with the conference and lost. I went UL Monroe to cover against A&M because I figured, well, hell, I got to. I went under in Vandy and UNLV. I didn't know that they were going to have the running Rebs running up and down the field against Vanderbilt.
Tarkanian and his boys were out there on that football
Had
field.
Larry Johnson, Grandma Mai out there scoring touchdowns. All right, that's enough of that segment. We'll put our best bets out there. You might want to fade me, but I'm going 3-0. Okay, I'm just letting you know. I'm going 3-0. We'll put those out there sometime Friday night, hopefully, probably Saturday morning, because Doring and I have a bad memory. Big Terp will stay on top of us. Okay.
Hey,
better bets, better times ahead.
Yes. I think we do need to congratulate. Like, it's virtually impossible to go 9-0. It's also virtually impossible to go 0-9. So you did something amazing, but here's the great part about it. We're in Vegas. We're looking across the casino. It's been 9 blacks in a row. It's got to be red this time. Let's go. This is the week. Let's put it on red. Load up.
Red 18. Load it up. Let's go get a winner. That's going to do it for this week 4 edition of Pregaming the SEC. My God, the slate is beautiful. I mean, it brings a tear to a glass eye. I cannot wait to be back next week pregaming with you. We appreciate you tuning in. Chris Doring, Big Terp. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place.